And so we'll begin with the word of prayer. What does it take, Father, for each of us to proclaim the gospel despite the opposition, those who oppose us, the concerns we have within ourselves? It's scary. Father, enable our courage to proclaim your good news in whatever way we can. Help us, Father. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Stephen, proclaiming the gospel. All right, here we go. Don't worry about 1 Corinthians. That'll go quick. But we will look at the Acts 5 and Acts 6 and 7.
I'll take Acts 5.
Okay.
I'll take 6.
Okay.
Fine.
See what happens. It's in the spring of 32 AD. Place is the palace of Caiaphas in Jerusalem, Judah, Canaan. 1 Corinthians 15, 6-7 reads, Then he appeared to more than 500 brothers and sisters at one time. Then he appeared to James. This is just a catch-up, okay?
And as a reminder, which James is this?
This is the apostle.
Apostle, okay.
The thing that I find interesting with my readings that I'm doing at home right now is I'm noticing the large numbers that are always thrown out there. Like
3,000.
I thought they'd be a little more accurate, but like I'm reading Josephus, he's just as blatant about it. I mean, the numbers they throw out there, like the men in one tribe, they got out. I'm making this up off the top of my head. 100,000 soldiers.
Sure.
Well, now where in the world are you going to get 100,000 men in that little community all of a sudden carrying swords and shields? So the numbers to me are misleading.
Agreed.
To me, what I think I would, from my point of view, is just saying, okay, we had a large number of people.
Yeah. Here's a crowd.
Yeah.
Okay? I'll take the 500 simply because it's a good number. It's easy to work with. But it was a big crowd, and I'm sure he didn't sit there and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No. He said, it's about 500. Okay? In the weeks since the resurrection, the apostles and disciples continued to meet regularly and attend the temple, and their numbers continued to increase. That's the only thing that mattered. They're continuing to do what the Jews had done before. That is, go to the temple, do the Torah thing, and things grew. That's okay. That's all we're talking about, right? That's catch-up. Okay? All right, any question about it? Okay, then let's get started. A true Hebrew Jew. Now, be careful. I'm going to use certain words, and I'm going to go through them, because you have to do it to tell them apart. A true Hebrew Jew was descended of a Jewish mother and grew up in the Jewish culture. Any question there? Good. A Hellenistic Jew was I call it genetic, I don't know if that's the right way to use the word, Jew, living outside of Israel, but whose culture was not primarily Jewish.
But it still have a Jewish mother because that's...
Still had a Jewish mother, right.
That's what made them
It's
Jew.
the culture here's the problem, the change. Both attended the synagogue and were instructed in the Torah. Either could become a Messianic Jew if they believed Jesus was God's Messiah. Okay, so this confusing phrase is going to keep coming up, and I apologize for it, but it's the only way we can do it to differentiate them. We have the Hebrew Jew and the Hellenistic Jew. Both are Messianic if they believe in Jesus as the Messiah.
It's interesting to me right now that the Messianic Jews, for a while, they were very, very strongly proselytizing in our society about their message.
Yes.
But in the last few years, I haven't hardly seen anything. And I find that interesting that they're not out there proselytizing their faith.
They've gone underground. I'm just kidding. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I understand. I'm just saying, it's interesting, this kind of cycle, and
Sure.
we're interested when they resurface in a sense.
And what we pay attention to changes quite a bit too. So, all right, here we go. But while the number of Messianic Jews increased under the 12 apostles, this is all Messianic Jews. By the summer of 31 AD, the number of Hellenistic Jews that also believed Jesus was the Messiah was exploding. These Jews spoke Greek and had assimilated Greek culture while remaining true to their Jewish heritage. Their numbers had increased so fast they had formed their own synagogues. Any question about that? This is the growth.
And that probably makes sense, because if they're Greek speaking primarily, they would want to have
Yes.
church, so to speak, in their own language.
Exactly. And that's why in the Eastern Orthodox Church you'd have the Greek church, or the Russian, or the Romanian, and you have all these Greek or these Orthodox churches, but each one has their own language and such. And we do the same thing here in the Protestant churches.
Oh, yeah, because when I was a kid, over in Chelan County, you would have, one of the big things over there at that time, this was in the early 50s, you would have a congregation. My grandparents' church, for instance, was Congregationalist, okay? Not UCC or any of that, strictly congregational, but they had services in the morning that were English.
Yep.
They had services in the afternoon or evening that were German.
German, yeah.
Okay, and it was a big issue for the Lutheran Church, because the Lutheran Church, you had this influx from going on all the time from Europe. You had the Norwegians and the Swedes and so on and so forth. And
Right.
the Ballard area of Seattle, for example, and each one had their own
Right.
system, yeah.
Yeah.
And they were doing the same, they basically were preaching the same gospel.
Of course.
But if it didn't have that accent, let me tell you.
Okay. And that's normal. What is it? Birds of a feather flock together. We all feel more comfortable when we're with people that are similar, because it's easier. You don't fight yourself so much. All right, here we go. As the winter of 31 AD approached, the religious authorities in Jerusalem began to consider these two groups as a new Jewish sect, the Messianists, whatever they call it, Messianists. Sure. And they had begun to look for ways to show their disapproval, because they weren't pure Jewish, Hebrew Jewish, okay? Thus, in September of 31 AD, the religious authorities cut off financial assistance to the widows of the followers of the Way. Those are the Messianic Jews, whether Hebrew or Greek or Hellenistic, they're all part of the Way.
Maybe we should call them the Torah Jews or something.
I might just do that. It'd be a little less confusing. All right, any question of what's happening? Okay, we don't approve that. We're going to cut your funds. That sounds so familiar. Control. But the growth of this sect was alarming to the religious authorities. Finally, they took action. They arrested Peter as the recognized leader, and as many other apostles as they could catch, while they were proclaiming the good news under the Portico of Solomon, where Jesus had been teaching. It was up here, under here, where Jesus had been teaching. The Portico of Solomon. Wisdom. Any question about it? Peter has finally been arrested here. After being questioned, they were put out of the Sanhedrin chambers. The consensus of the Sanhedrin appears to have been that they should be killed, as they had killed Jesus. However, one member, at least, Gamaliel, counseled caution. If God did not direct the movement, then it would fail. That's faith in God. Be patient, he counseled them. So Peter and the disciples were threatened with death. Oh, we love it. It's a very different culture from what we have today. Warned to stop telling the people that Jesus was the Messiah, and then they were flogged and released. Flogged means they're whipped or beaten with a rod or cane or something like that. Okay, it does not necessarily with their whole life at risk, but certainly enough to cause some discomfort.
remember what we said.
Yes, for at least as long as that still hurts you and the scabs are there. Okay, so their system was a little different from ours. The Romans, they beat you up first, then they started to question you. They want you to know, it's going to get worse if you don't tell us what we want to hear. But this is bad enough. We have it very easy today. They only, do other things to you, but they keep off you physically. Okay? Any question or thoughts so far?
And then wasn't Paul or Saul at the time a student of Gamaliel?
That is what is assumed, yes. He mentions that later, that he was, and he may not have been at this time, but he might have been. Okay, but he was at one point. Okay, here we go. Acts 6, 1 through 7.
Now during those days when the disciples were increasing in number, the Hellenists complained against the Hebrews because their widows were being neglected in the daily distribution of food. And the 12 called together the whole community of the disciples and said, "It is not right that we should neglect the word of God in order to wait on tables." That's interesting. "Therefore, brothers and sisters, select from among yourselves 7 men of good standing, full of the Spirit and of wisdom, whom we may appoint to this task, while we, for our part, will devote ourselves to prayer and to serving the word." What they said pleased the whole community, and they chose Stephen, a man full of faith and the Holy Spirit, together with Philip.
And the others. Go ahead, try to pronounce them.
Okay. They had these men stand before the apostles, who prayed and laid their hands on them. The word of God continued to spread. The number of disciples increased greatly in Jerusalem, and a great many of the priests became obedient to the faith.
Wow. Okay. What does it tell you?
Well, so very clearly, they divided up work because they couldn't manage it all.
You mean to say that everyone isn't responsible to do everything? That one may have a gift in a certain area, another may have a gift in a different area?
There you go.
And that we divide that in order that the whole church still is served, but each according to our own ability, right? Is that what it's saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it seems.
Yeah.
And so I get that, dividing up the work.
Yes,
But
you would.
so then the whole community choosing Stephen, that also is probably pretty easy to see. You got to pick somebody. But the whole thing is, the part that gets my attention is when you get down to the priests becoming obedient to the faith, because that's a very select group.
Very select group. That's something we normally ignore. It seems to be saying that at least a fair number of religious bureaucrats, priests, start to believe in the faith, became part of the way. Now we normally don't think of that. We skip that part. Okay? And by the way, I would like you to note 2 people here, Stephen and Philip. This will become Philip the evangelist, which we'll talk about later. So I'm just kind of giving you that heads up ahead of time. Okay? So, anything else you see here?
Well, and it wasn't just who's willing to do this menial job kind of thing. No, they were looking for people who are good standing, full of the spirit of wisdom.
High quality.
Yeah, they had to meet certain standards to even serve in places of any kind of authority.
Yeah. So effectively, you're talking about the people who hold the purse. And if you're dealing with the people that hold the purse, you need someone you can trust.
Well, that's true. However, there's more to it than it looks like. Okay? It's not just waiting on tables. Busboys, that kind of thing. These are people who will do that service thing, but are going to do a whole lot more such as proclaiming the gospel in the public, such as sermonizing, I'll call it that, teaching. There's a whole lot more than just waiting on tables.
This would be the deacons, basically.
That will be later what they will call them, but not yet. But here's the beginning of the structure of the church, where every position, unless you're desperate, you really look for someone to fill that position who can do it and will not be tempted by that position to abuse it. Okay? It's not just, hi, I'd like to handle your money. It's, are you capable of it? Are you desiring to do it for the Lord? Can we trust you in this? All of these factors. This is a church beginning to organize. And that's what we have to recognize here. Go ahead. Anything else? Here we go.
Only comment I would make is that if you don't organize the church, it's not going to last. You have to.
It has,
especially when it gets bigger.
It's something we have to do. I don't know about you, but I organize my life in whatever way I am able to do. And then that affects the next person around me. There's going to be some effect of my organizing me. I'm going to expect them to organize them as well to a certain point. And we start cooperating or fighting, okay? And then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. You nailed it right on the head.
Well, and I'm reminded that this isn't something brand new. When the Israelites were out in the wilderness and it was getting to be too much for Moses, I can't handle all of these problems and everything.
Yep.
And so he was advised to, we'll break them up and, people will be over thousands and hundreds and whatever.
Yes.
So it's
normal.
It makes it normal.
Right.
It brings the bureaucracy into manageable chunks.
Right. So, but here, it's all based on the Spirit. It's supposed to be on the Spirit. Okay? It was at the time. These are peoples that are, well, we'll get into that. Anything else? But after a few months, the apostles' use of funds seemed less than perfect. The Hellenistic Jews felt that the funds to support the widows was not being allocated evenly. There goes the spelling error. It seemed that the apostles were more generous with the widows of the Hebrew Messianic followers and less generous with the widows of the Hellenistic Messianic followers. See the two groups. And you have the two groups. Each one has their own culture, okay? And they are concerned about their own people. So if one group is running the whole show and is more concerned about their people, the other one's going to get slighted, at least in somebody's view. And that's what the concern was.
Well, it's probably the case.
It's normal. It would not be surprising that that would be the case.
If your widows are hungry, you know.
And theirs aren't.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a problem. We don't know how much of a problem this was, but there was enough that it becomes an issue or a stimulus for what comes next.
Mm-hmm. But they did it the right way.
Correct. They found a way to do it. To assure that this was not the case, it was decided that the 12 would continue to minister to the Hebrew Messianic followers, and that the Hellenists would handle the funds set aside for their own. 7 young men would be chosen to minister to the Hellenistic Messianic followers, one of which was Stephen. Okay? They came to this agreement, not a problem. They found a way to divide the funds between the two groups. The days when cooperation worked. Okay.
But I think one of the big ones there is the ability to speak Greek.
I think you're right. And
it wouldn't do any good to appoint any of those men to that group if they could not communicate.
Well, they could communicate somewhat because all of them had been taught in the synagogues. A certain amount of Hebrew comes with the Torah, and you're going to get a certain amount of that. but they're more comfortable in your own language. And so that's best to put them together.
Well, and
Nowadays, it's illegal. Go ahead.
the other part of it is it's possible that these women who were lesser members of society at the time, it's possible that these women were bashful about even asking these Hebrew people for help.
Or embarrassed.
Yeah, or embarrassed,
you
yeah.
know. Yeah, I wouldn't be a bit surprised.
But to talk to somebody that they understand that's close to them, that's a different answer.
On the other hand, if I recall Jewish women correctly, they're pretty verbal in the movies. And I'm just relaxed, I'm just having fun with that. You never know. See, but there was an issue, and they solved it. Okay, and they solved it by getting two groups to handle themselves, especially this tabling thing. But more. Stephen was a Hellenistic Jew, possibly from Alexandria, Egypt, who was proclaiming Jesus as the Messiah in the Hellenistic freemen, they may have been former slaves, synagogue in Jerusalem. So there was a synagogue in Jerusalem. There were Hellenists, and they called themselves the freemen, probably former slaves. Okay? There he met with Jews and maybe proselytes, non-Jews that believed in the Jewish religion, from all over the eastern Mediterranean area, from Cyrene and Alexandria in the south to Cilicia and Asia in the north, to discuss, that's the Greek way of putting it, to discuss or dispute the claims that Jesus was the Messiah. He's teaching, he's debating, he's discussing, he's learning, he's doing all of this, not just waiting on tables.
But he's always come across to me in the scriptures, even though it's very small, that he had the ability to do it calmly, to be able to communicate in a way that wasn't threatening, perhaps, and that he didn't raise intentionally angst in everybody.
He didn't attack them.
Yeah, he found a way to, and again, it comes back to that word, communicate. He found a way, in a less stressful way, at least he probably thought, of preaching to them.
Right.
Teaching
them, proclaiming the gospel.
Yeah.
Right. I agree with you that he would be, well, here we go. From all reports, Stephen was up to the challenge. He was enthusiastic, energetic, flamboyant, and full of the wisdom of God. He was likable and spoke the truth as he saw it. He had won over many, showing them unexpected, even miraculous ways that Jesus was God's Messiah and offering a new covenant for God's people.
Sounds like he was a very charismatic person.
Good, there's a word you can use. That's a good one. Okay? He was full of the Spirit. And he was considered the leader. He was mentioned here because he seemed even the best of the bunch, although not the only. The other ones would do the same thing, as we'll find out later. But he came to the fore. Just the gifts that had been given him, that the Spirit was going to use, were in flower. Okay? Any question about his potential personality here and the way in which he proclaimed the gospel? Once again, the Holy Spirit acted to guide the growing church. It wasn't called a church yet. That's why I put it in parentheses. United in the Spirit, believers organized their own collection for the widows, and many believers came to believe that most of the resources of the brothers and sisters in Christ could be used most effectively if the apostles would manage the funds. And the funds were donated by all who had extra. Some even sold extra property in order to help the widows get through the winter. I'm not going to bother with that particular story, okay? This is an introduction to this, not every detail of it, okay? So, generally speaking, they made collections, people kind of held things in common, they donated stuff, maybe even in a communal way, to a certain extent. But I'm sure there were those who did not participate in that, but donated as they saw fit. But this was the point, to make sure that the widows were taken care of, that they were fed at the very least. That's a responsibility. The Jews understood that from the beginning. It's one of the two major responsibilities, to make sure that the widows are taken care of. Here they did. Any question or thought? Acts 6, 8 through 10.
Stephen, full of grace and power, did great wonders and signs among the people. Then some of those who belonged to the synagogue of the freemen, as it was called, Cyrenes, Alexandrians, and others of those from Cilicia and Asia, stood up and argued with Stephen. But they could not withstand the wisdom and the spirit with which he spoke.
Okay. What does it tell you?
He stood his ground.
He stood his ground, and
Well, so clearly they couldn't argue with him because they didn't have the abilities that he had
they
to
didn't,
express
or they
his
didn't
argument.
have the insight,
Yeah,
or the gifts that he had were above them in a sense. It was beyond what they were able to deal with in any kind of a negative way. He was full of the Spirit.
well, and it's
Charismatic.
always harder to argue a point if you're wrong.
That doesn't stop people from doing it, does it? No. I shouldn't go there. Okay, in the spring of 32 AD, they got through the winter, the women were taken care of. The situation got hot. Stephen, one of the 7 who ministered to the Hellenist Messianic followers, was convincing a large number of Hellenistic Jews that Jesus was the Messiah, trying to convince them to become Messianic. And it was working. That sparked a violent reaction by the conservative Hellenistic Jews, who followed the Torah and the temple observance and did not believe that Jesus was the Messiah. It's believing in Jesus as the Messiah that's the key here, that takes it apart. Okay? If you believe in Jesus as the Jewish Messiah, you're a Messianic Jew. If you don't, you're not. Here you have conservative Hellenistic Jews, but they're conservative. They don't believe that Jesus was the Messiah.
Was that the only hot point button issue that separated them?
It was the one that's most spoken
They
of.
were basically, if we get down to the nitty gritty in a sense, or the simplest, if they basically are all Jews, there have to be certain areas where they do agree.
Yes.
Because they're using the same text, and so on. And so there have to be, it's like taking care of the widows and the orphans. They both agree to do that, but
Yes.
in their own way.
Yeah, the lowest level of agreement then, the base, but not the lowest level, but the base, would be the Torah still. And then the synagogue, where you are read certain scripture from the Old Testament, what we call the Old Testament, where you discuss, they would follow certain patterns that were from the Hebrew time, but they do it in the different languages, or they alter them somewhat because of their own preferences, but basically the Torah.
And
Okay.
yes, Jesus was the dividing.
That is the key. That's what they tell us here in Scriptures. That was the division point. Okay? And he is the dividing point.
Well, he was very clear about that in his ministry.
Yes, he was. But some people don't want to hear that. Okay? As you'll find out in a moment. Stephen was brought to the palace of Caiaphas for questioning by the religious authority. This is the restructure of the palace of Caiaphas. Jesus was there. Okay? There was the fire pit where Peter denied Jesus 3 times, and then as he walked. Anyway, so it's the same palace, same guy. And charged with preaching that there should be serious changes in the way the Torah was understood and administered, and that the temple observance should be eliminated. Question question there, thought?
No, that however, if you talk about the temple observances being shut off, that is threatening to not only your current, if you're a
Current
palace.
conservative,
Right, not only a threat to them, but it's a threat to their history, to their everything.
yeah, it's a total. And here's the funny part. The charges were perceptively accurate. After all, Jesus had proclaimed a spiritual kingdom without the need of a temple, and that the kingdom was based on faith in God and not observance of an external law. They were right. If he was preaching this thing, he's going to be a problem.
Well, and also it's the whole thing of the sacrifices. Jesus was the ultimate and final blood sacrifice. You
Yep.
don't need the animals
Anymore.
It's done.
Yep.
It's finished. Christ
And
is
that's
holy.
going to irritate some people who want to do that and have done it all their lives and believe firmly that that's what they're supposed to do.
And let's face it, the whole income structure of the Levites is based on getting a percentage of the donations.
The whole structure financially of the whole system, including the government, is all based on that as well. The temple tax, the Roman tax, it's all part and parcel. The government is the religion is the government. It's the same thing. So Stephen's going to cause a problem here, and the people picked it up precisely correctly, because that's what Jesus had proclaimed. Any question or thought yet? Acts 6, 11 through 15.
Let's see here. Then they secretly instigated some men to say, "We have heard him speak blasphemously words against Moses and God." They stirred up the people as well as the elders and the scribes. Then they suddenly confronted him, seized him, and brought him before the council. They set up false witnesses who said, "This man never stopped saying things against this holy place and the law. For we have heard him say that this Jesus of Nazareth will destroy this place and will change the customs that Moses handed onto us." And all who sat in the council looked intently at him, and they saw that his face was like the face of an angel.
Okay, what happened?
They confronted him.
Well, they couldn't get an argument working right, so they turned him over to the Jewish leadership. Okay? What did they say? He was blasphemous. That's a very technical term.
Yes, it is. But, so if he's saying that you don't need these sacrifices, that was written in law.
Yeah.
If you don't need to support the temple, that was written in law.
Okay.
The customs that Moses handed down, all that other stuff besides the Ten Commandments.
Okay.
But they were at that cut point, really, because Jesus was still alive, and it would have been very difficult to understand all of a sudden that change, as you pointed out, moving from the need for all of those types of rules and laws, that Jesus was the final, because that hadn't really been established well.
Right.
It wouldn't be. And so, I could understand their confusion, because also, back to what Ken said, their authority was being challenged.
Yes. Okay. Now I'll get kind of more specific here, so that you're aware of it.
Well, before you
Go
go,
ahead.
one last thing that
Sure.
they just kind of nail on the end of this, that his face was like the face of an angel. To me, that is very clearly written with a leaning toward Christianity.
You think maybe the author was kind of leaning that direction? Good, I'm glad to hear that. At the same time, let's take that and understand it. So hang on, here we go. But in the spring of 32 AD, when those who could not successfully convince others of their position, they started rumors to the effect that Stephen had blasphemed against God and Moses. Now, technically, Stephen would have had to use the name of God in order to blaspheme. But loosely, he needed only to speak against something associated with God to be accused of blasphemy. But he did not blaspheme unless he used the name of God. Technical. Okay? So be aware that's a technical issue here. But to speak against, it's like in some countries right now, you can't speak against the leader or you will be arrested and sent to Siberia or whatever country I happen to be thinking of at the moment. Or in many of the other countries of the world, you can't even complain about something. Okay? It's the same thing. You're complaining, therefore you're blaspheming the leader. Okay? So it's that thing. It still happens. Leaders want to protect themselves completely. They don't want anybody arguing with them. Okay? Any question? This accusation stirred up some folks, including enough of the leadership that they seized Stephen, and took him to stand trial before the Sanhedrin. It's not just, it's the conservative Hellenists that brought him up to the Hebrew Jews. They took him back to the original ones that had crucified Jesus and had him crucified. Okay? Instead of just handling it themselves, they couldn't, so they turned him over to the religious authorities. Because they got more authority to do bad things. I mean, to put this guy under control. Okay? Tell him to shut up. Any question? We're not quite done here. There they accused him of speaking against the temple and the Torah. Stephen may not have emphasized these points, but they were in fact a true understanding of the teaching of Jesus. In Matthew 9:13, Jesus taught that God wanted mercy, not sacrifice. That one's internal attitude was of greater concern than external ceremonies in Matthew 5. That the kingdom of David would be a spiritual, not a physical kingdom in John. So, he's speaking the truth, and they can't handle that. They don't want to handle it. So he's blaspheming against the temple and the Torah. Both were given by God to the Jews. And they're right about that. Just not really blaspheming. Stephen was accused of predicting the destruction of the temple and of overturning the traditional interpretation of the law given to Moses. Not acceptable. You've got to get rid of a guy like that. And every society does the same thing. You get rid of those who don't proclaim things as you see them. You know, that's just the way it is. It's the way people are. And here you go. And the more they said, the broader became Stephen's smile. They had heard the gospel. They didn't want it. They didn't like it. But they'd heard it. And I can just see him smiling. Yeah, you got it, folks. Good. Yeah. Any question or thought so far?
But that kind of thing continues to repeat itself over and over historically.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's like, you know, I look at today, I look at it on a political level, unfortunately, and that individual, the elephant in the room, to me is the Antichrist, because he is out there preaching a completely different message, using in a sense, the gospel
Right.
in a very bad way.
Okay.
And everybody is just lapping that up like a dog in a water dish. And I cannot figure it out because that just terrifies me.
Okay. And again, that's going to bring smiles to certain faces. But again, it's a matter of your position, your interpretation, and where you stand on these things. It's your bringing. See, in that, you are the prime Jew in the Sanhedrin, going, this guy is, he's got to be Antichrist. That's the same phrase for you. Because of your position, how you grew up, what you came to believe, what the gospel, what the Torah taught you. It's 1,000, 1,500 years of history of God working to his people. Yeah, you have every right to feel that way. But it's normal to do that, and you demonize the other side.
And Luther and the Catholic Church.
That's right.
You know, they thought he was...
All the Protestants and the Catholic Church had that issue, the leaders. So the Catholic Church burned them, for example, Hess and such. They burn them at the stake because they don't like what they're saying. It's normal. But, as Gamaliel said, if it's not of God, it will die out. It never died out because this is of God. Moving on. I can see that's what I mean about an angelic face there. Okay, Acts 7, 1-50. Relax. In response to the high speak's question of Stephen's guilt or innocence, Stephen is reported to have given a summary of Jewish history, though it is unlikely that the prosecutor would have allowed such a speech. So I'm skipping it. It's just the history. Okay? You don't have to read out loud. Okay, here we go. Moving on. Acts 7, 53 and 54. Who has Acts 7?
I thought I had Acts 5 something.
Okay, here it is. You are the ones, Stephen says, that received the law as ordained by angels, and yet you have not kept it. When they heard these things, they became enraged and ground their teeth at Stephen. He just told them something that they didn't really want to hear, that they had been given this by God and that they were messing it up totally. What does it tell you? Anything else? How are they going to receive this? Not. Here we go. But when Stephen boldly and truthfully, regardless of what their reaction would be, accused the Jewish leadership of a response to the righteous one sent by God, Jesus, in the same way that leaders of the past had not received God's messengers, and then stating unequivocally that they had deliberately, through picky rules and regulations, destroyed the law given by God for the benefit of his people. Yeah, that's what you want to hear when you're in authority, right? And what had all the Jewish leadership always done to the prophets? They killed them. They pushed them aside. They badmouthed them, to say the least. Okay? They'd done that all of Jewish history. And here it happened again. And Stephen is saying, you did that again. Any question or thought? Acts 7, 55 through 56 reads, but filled with the Holy Spirit, he gazed into heaven and saw the glory of God and Jesus standing at the right hand of God. Look, he said, I see the heavens opened and the Son of Man standing at the right hand of God. What did he see?
A vision?
Yes, a vision.
And he saw this person who they thought was a blasphemer, standing in authority next to the Father.
Wow, that's kind of like heaping coals on it. You know? All of a sudden, he's looking into heaven. And he sees the throne of God and the position of authority. to the guy they killed. Brilliant.
Well, I mean, the people looking at him, no doubt, thought he was delusional and
Absolutely.
had to be fixed.
Of course. Okay? Because they don't see the vision. He sees it. And he describes it. Okay? At that moment, Stephen had a vision, and the Christ revealed himself to Stephen. The Christ was standing beside the throne of God in a position of authority. It doesn't have to be right or left-handed. Okay? It simply means the position of authority. And this is what he sees as someone has been depicted it. God looking very old and relaxed. He's chilled out. And there's Jesus looking what? Like he's welcoming you. See the hands? He's welcoming you. Okay?
This opened up a whole new chapter of life for me after Irma's passing, because all of a sudden these kind of drawings, if you will, maybe really look at, this text where it says there is a room waiting for us, and we are lifted up to that room. God's going to take care of us. And I have a hard time visualizing that kind of setting in heaven, because it doesn't make sense to me, everything that I read scripturally. And but yet at the same time, it's so comforting to me to know that she is surrounded by the saints.
Good.
That they're comforting her and providing her what I couldn't. Okay, and that I should have maybe seen that for myself. I don't know, but I just know right now that the only part of that makes sense to me is the idea of God and Jesus.
Yeah. I have real problems trying to visualize in this way, the way these pictures are visualizing. I perceive it as, up here in the cold, I like warm. It's like she was suddenly within a warm blanket of all the saints that are there and in the arms of Christ. And I can't visualize that, but I know that feeling, that I'm welcomed, I'm comforted, so I have problems with visualization in these fashions, the way the artists do it. What I don't have a problem doing is that God has given authority to Christ. And that authority is one that says, you're welcome. We're going to forgive your sins, and you can come in here and be welcomed in the family. Okay? Whatever that means visually, I don't know.
No, we can't.
No.
It's just a whole different dimension.
But many people need to have a visual thing. But they then depend on that visual thing. That's where it comes into problem. It becomes an idol. But some people just need to see it. Back in the days of the Jews wandering, they had the same problem. They wanted to see their God, so they built the serpent.
Well, I love your description, though, the warming blanket. That's a very comforting thought, because that makes more sense to me. Because the way I visualize it in the scriptures is that we're taken into that body of Christ, and that we are gathered up.
Yes.
And it's not due to anything in any way, shape, or form that we've done. It is simply through the grace and salvation of Christ.
Which is the warming blanket, if you'll pardon my expression, because it can't be anything I did. It would be my reward.
Yeah.
It is, despite all of me, I'm loved.
But the part that bothers me too was just the other day, and I don't know how they could. I mean, it's kind of off the subject. The 7-day Adventists at my house. And what they were saying orally had truth, but what they were doing to me was wrong, because they were trying to earn points. And that's where I would draw the line.
Right.
And say to them otherwise, but I don't waste the time.
Right.
And to me, the most wonderful, one of the neatest things, I think I shared with you and Ann one time, my grandfather was a very honest Nebraska farmer, and when he came out here one time, he was working in the barn around his animals, and he had small animals out here, but they made a whole lot of manure. And he had gotten home from working his job, and he had to go down to the barn and feed his animals because they came first before him. And the bottom line was he didn't have time for them. And he looked at them and he said, well, if you want me to listen to you, come down and give me a pitchfork.
That's
And
right.
he didn't help me at that time.
That's
Because
right.
I need the help.
I need the help.
Guess what they did? Sure.
You bet.
No, they
Oh, they
weren't.
left.
Yeah, they didn't want any part of that.
That's not, okay.
So that solved it for him. But my point is that comforting, that warming, that feeling of welcoming, that, I love your use of the word, of feeling of that blanket coveringness.
That's as close as I can get to a visualization.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
I agree, John. Otherwise, I don't know.
So, we are welcome, and I could put it as a warm cloud if I want, even better. Because then I am with all the others who are there with the Christ, and that's the warmth. I am accepted. I'm forgiven, and I'm accepted.
The ultimate coming home without necessarily the physical stuff,
Yeah.
the dishes to wash.
Good point. Okay, here we go. Yes, here we go. Jesus is the Messiah. I see him beside the throne of God. You have killed an innocent man. You will be held accountable. That is not what they wanted to hear.
Bring out the stones.
Here we go. Acts 7, 57 through 58a. But they cried out with a loud voice and covered their ears and rushed at him with one impulse. When they had driven him out of the city, they began stoning him.
Ooh.
Wait a minute. How did not? Is that normal? Is the response normal for people?
Well, it's scriptural.
It is. And it's also very normal to demonize that which has opposed you and you think is wrong. You have to deal with them somehow. You don't want them to teach your children, for example. Okay? So you have to do something. In those days, this was something.
Oh, yeah, because, I mean, in the Old Testament, it said, you know,
That's it.
if someone does this or they do
They're to be
this,
stoned.
you take them out and stone them, because you cannot let
Right.
that pervert and affect your people.
Correct. Very good. And so they're scriptural here. And they were very upset. This is normal behavior for them at the time. This was too much. Their anger was predictable, and immediate. In anger, as a response to the guilt they felt at the truth of Stephen's words, or to the firm belief that he was wrong. They loudly demanded he be silenced. Emotions ran high, and many were caught up, such that a mob formed. Question, thought, or comment? The righteous anger of the crowd boiled over, and a near riot began. The crowd grabbed Stephen, and the religious leaders did nothing to interfere. The crowd dragged Stephen out of the palace. Notice they bind him up a little bit. That way he can't run away when he's being stoned. He's an easier target. Okay? Any question? Thought?
You think Stephen had any doubt at that point that he was going to die?
No, no doubt at all. No doubt at all. Not in my opinion.
Yeah, well, I would agree with that, yeah.
Acts 7, 58b to 60. Here we go. And the witnesses laid their coats at the feet of a young man named Saul. While they were stoning Stephen, he prayed, Lord Jesus, receive my spirit. Then he knelt down and cried out in a loud voice, Lord, do not hold this sin against them. When he had said this, he died. Question or thought?
Who wrote all that down?
This is all Luke, who was we believe the author of the book of Acts.
Yeah, I was,
Who was there watching and listening and get all the word? Remember?
Well, there was the young man named Saul. That's Paul. I mean,
He was right there.
You know that, there were other,
Good point.
there were a lot of witnesses. It
And
was a
remember
mob.
what Paul said at the end of John said it. I don't write this just for the fun of it, for history. I do this so that you will come to believe. And that means they didn't have any problem making slight changes either, so that you better understood what was happening. We've got to be very careful with using exact phrases such as that. So, here he is, he died.
Part of what bothers me at this point is because of our situation in society right now, is were there children present and were they allowed to witness this? I mean,
Yeah.
honest gosh, this would have been horrific.
Children would not have been allowed to be throwing the stones, probably, unless it was an older child, maybe. This was a man's job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And
they
by the
were
way,
there.
these are not stones, these are rocks. These are good size, meant to crush skulls. Okay? So, please keep that in mind. Here we go. Because of the time that this took, some cooler heads decided that they would like this action to appear as the judgment of the trial. So they had those that had been witnesses remove their coats and place them before the young man named Saul. Okay. Saul was assigned the task of watching over the coats while the witnesses picked up rocks and were first to throw them at Stephen. So this is now an official looking judgment. Okay, they have a person in charge of it, essentially. At least in charge to the point of agreeing with it and watching over their cloaks. Okay, any question? Like Jesus had yielded up his spirit to the Father, Stephen yielded up his spirit to the welcoming arms of the Messiah and asked forgiveness for the ignorance of his executioner as he died. Fell asleep till the resurrection was a later understanding of the church. Fell asleep. Died. Until the resurrection when he would be returned. Any question? How hard it is to witness for the Lord. At times it's very hard. And even if we're not threatened with death, it's still very hard.
Well, I'll tell you, the memorial in Japan, I think it's 7 priests that were not crucified, but that were killed for their faith.
Right.
It's so moving. That jumped right into my mind at this point, what Stephen is having happen.
Yep.
Because they too were judged immediately just for preaching the word.
Correct.
And when I saw it that first time, I was 30 years younger than I am now, almost, if not more. And it was so moving to me, and it's a very, very beautiful monument.
Yeah, good.
In that, and this just, I just can't get around my mind around this. I mean, this
Okay.
is just horrific.
Well, in our modern time, there are certain groups that if you proclaim Jesus as the Christ, or in any way, you will be killed. It is illegal in certain countries to even mention this kind of thing, trying to change the opinion of the current people, of the rulers. That's the same thing. Okay? No different. And we've had many of our followers, they've died in this process, killed by those in authority. Any question or thought or comment? Then when next time we get together, we're going to meet the evangelist Philip as he meets the Ethiopian.